Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness, the highest levels of love light. I want to give a little energy update, and I want to talk a little bit about my own personal experience, and I'm going to title this, I think, Being Human. So I'll start off with my personal experience, then I'll go into a little energy update with what's been going on. There's been just a lot of stuff, always, right? So recently, I was planning on calling this You Don't Know What You Don't Know. Cryon always says that. I've been listening to him for quite some time. Not recently, but when I first started this kind of expansive awakening portion of my journey. Jason Estes says it a lot, and it really is showing up again and again for me personally. You know, I think I know something, and then I realize, oh, no, I don't. And, but then again, the things that we do know, they're there. We know them. They're innate. They're within us. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is COrVID. Surprise, surprise. If you guys haven't watched my COrVID video, I was calling COVID COrVID because I had it before it was a thing, and I'm not making it less than it is to say that right off the bat, but before it was a thing, I was getting all these messages about it, so in case you haven't seen that video, and I didn't realize that the message was, I thought it was COrVID, but it was actually the other. And COrVID to me is crow as well as raven. It's that group of birds, and it represents for me as a shapeshifter. It represents magic. And so how can we associate COrVID, that's what I call it now, with magic and shapeshifting? I thought I was misinterpreting the word. And technically I did misinterpret it when I was writing it out. It's like, what is this? Although I did write out the actual word too. But at the time I didn't know what that was because it didn't exist. Obviously it already existed, right? So everything's happening now. And I was tuning into that future of where it was going to be a part of our lives. But I thought, oh, I must be writing about crow. And in actuality, they are very similar because to me, it is a shapeshifter. It has changed drastically since it started, right, as a virus. So what I wanted to share was this last week, my husband and I both had it again. Now, I'll back up for a moment and just share some basics, some normal 3D stuff. And I'm just going to get personal. And this is not to start a conversation about it. I'm not here to add to anybody's opinion or take away from anybody's opinion. Speaking of my husband. Anyways, so I kind of lost my track where I was, but so essentially, the personal. So I'm not here to get into a conversation about opinions and all of that, because realistically, we don't know what we don't know. Oftentimes, there's this dialogue going on, and I've been sucked into it many times. And I'm just not going to get sucked into it anymore. This was a really good opportunity for me. Andrew Bartzis calls COrVID the gift that keeps on giving. And again, I'm not trying to be lighthearted about what it is. There are people who have lost loved ones to this virus and and it's not, it can be very heartbreaking for some. It can be very challenging and difficult. It can cause other issues. And so there is that element. Then there's also the element that some people have chosen to have this for whatever reason. It could be that they're fulfilling a contract. It could be that they want to experience it in order to experience it. I know that sounds crazy, but there's a lot of things I do on here that sound crazy. And there are some people who have chosen it to use it as an exit because they don't want to be here anymore, or they've already done what they came here to do, and this is their way out. I mean, there's many different ways of looking at it, and it depends on the person and the situation, of course. So I have my personal choice has been not to get the juice. My husband's personal choice has been to get the juice twice. And he was not due for the third juice, so to speak. Over a month and a half out would have been the time frame that's been suggested in the dialogue. And he was sicker, is that right? Sicker than I was, by a lot. We did go and do the monoclonal antibody treatment for him, and he did improve within 24, 48 hours. He was already we think, on the up. However, COrVID's sneaky. You think you're doing okay, and then boom, it hits you again. And so that was something we've both made very different decisions. And I will say that over the course of the last 2 years, this has been a conversation between us. And I have made huge shifts in my reality in order to support him in his choices that I did not necessarily agree with, and vice versa. Because in his mind, he did not agree with my decision, but we agreed to disagree. And again, I'm not here this is perfect example of what a lot of other people are going through. And I think it's very valid to be able to have this conversation openly. Now, I could go on and tell many details. I've been wearing a mask the entire time. Whenever I've been around any people, I don't go out much. So my exposure is very limited to other people who are wearing masks. I'm just going to put that out there. And, but we don't know what we don't know. Who knows? Also, I feel that I go back to Andrew Bartzis again, the gift that keeps on giving, because for me, it gave us the opportunity this week to spend time together and just to really be together and kind of shut down. I couldn't really shut down too much from the outside world because I had things going on with clients and whatnot, but it gave us the opportunity to just care for one another. What do you need? What do I need? How can I help you? How can you help me? I get emotional. I got really emotional the first time around. And it was just beautiful in that sense. And it brought us closer together, I feel. So there's another gift in that for me personally. Now, I did go through those thoughts of, and I want to share, I take vitamins, I'm healthy, I exercise. I wouldn't say I'd exercise like some people do, but my own version of it. I meditate. So we could say it's because of this, it's because of that. It doesn't matter. I'm here to share from my perspective. I don't care what others are going to tell me is the reason it did or did not happen, or it happened the way that it did. I hear a lot of opinions. I hear a lot of thoughts about what we think we know. And then when it happens to us, I thought that I wouldn't get it again. I truly believed that. I thought I wouldn't get it the first time. My husband thought he wouldn't get it, which is why he made the choice that he made. And ultimately, I've learned that if you're going to get it, you're going to get it. And so what can you learn from that experience? I will share on a very experiential, symptoms and all that. I might have shared that in my first video. This was just like a cold. It wasn't even the same thing at all. Hence COrVID, the crow, the shapeshifter. It's helped shape and reshape my reality for many different reasons, which maybe I will do a video on just that sometime to share all of the epiphanies that I've had along with experiencing this in my body. So the only reason I knew that I had it is because I felt very thirsty. If I hadn't had it before, I would have thought I just had a cold. But this is different because I was so thirsty. And every time I've had a cold my entire life, I don't want water. I want apple juice or tea. I don't like to drink a lot of water when I have a cold. It's very strange. And we each have our own idiosyncrasies, I guess we would call it. Some people, whenever they get sick, they always have this. You know, there's a theme. Well, this was different. And I realized when I was really, really thirsty, I was like, this feels a little bit like the first time around. And that was it. I mean, that was pretty much the only similarity. I did have one bout of some nerve pain for about an hour. So at night, I'm going to drink my water. So that's what I want to share, because it's something that we should, from my perspective, be able to discuss and be able to talk about. So for some people, they don't realize they have it. They think they just have a cold. But from another perspective, that's what it's become. That's what it's shape-shifting into. So it is very much like that. And so when we get it, it's actually our immune system is creating a new program around it, right? It's creating a new grid system. It's creating a new, which is our antibodies, right? Which is our body, our skin suit technology that is essentially adapting to the new environmental changes in our environment. So that's what I wanted to share with that. And that's something that's been, a difficult journey from one perspective for my husband and I to come to this place. And so it was a gift that keeps on giving from our perspective in our situation. Obviously, it's different for everyone. All right. The second thing I wanted to share, I could go into that a lot more. Maybe if I feel it's relevant, I will. Was this week. So having had that this week, about a week long, we also had solar flare activity, massive. I didn't even look it up to see where it was. I felt it. I usually feel solar activity the night before or 24 hours before it happens. And then the next day it's like, oh, okay, here it is. We've got the full moon today. I guess Mercury went into retrograde. I don't know how long that's going on for. Apparently Venus was in retrograde. Not sure how long something was going on with Jupiter. So it would suffice to say, right? That there's a lot going on. And I always pop on here and I'm like, there's so much going on, because there is. The question becomes, has there always been this much going on, but we just weren't able to feel it like we are now, or has all of that heightened? I would venture to say a little bit of both. I do feel like it's heightened. The activities have heightened. The earth is expanding, and as she expands, there has to be a push. There has to be room made in certain areas. So we have a lot of heightened earth activity. Some of it is probably attached to some inorganic things, and there's also a lot of organic activity as well. The inorganic, from what I have been shown, is not working like it used to. And this is something I talked about maybe 6 months ago. It doesn't have the same effect. I'm being guided to say the same gravitational pull. And that's in part because of us. It's because of where we're spinning at and how we're spinning and how we're creating. So that was part of the message that I got. Another one of the messages I've been getting a lot about. So this week was pretty intense. And what does that look like? Well, I've done videos on ascension symptoms, which I call upgrade. I forgot what I called it really. Upgrade, physical upgrades. We're going through these upgrades. And essentially, it's different for everyone. Again, all of this is different for everyone and how we experience it. It's really important to ground and anchor and give ourselves just patience and drink plenty of water and get as many natural foods as we can, get ingredients, the nutrients from natural and organic foods. I'm not going to go into all of that because we all know what we need to do for the most part. Sometimes I'll work with someone and they honestly don't know. They've got a block around it, or they're just missing a component, and sometimes I can feel into, a particular vitamin that might be good for them, or something that really big in their field. I worked with a beautiful light worker that had a lot of intestinal stuff going on, a lot of colon stuff. I've worked with people that have had parasites. Sometimes I know because I've experienced it myself, and I recognize the feeling, and I'm like, ooh, okay, I feel this in me, therefore. So it's different for everyone, and a lot of people are really what I call in it right now, going through that dark night. The soul isn't, right? If the soul isn't dark, it just feels like we're in the dark. It feels like we're completely disconnected from source. It feels like we might be at our lowest of lows. You guys, that is going on for a lot of people right now. And at the same time, there's a lot of people that are really high right now. They're in this really great space of higher vibration. And it's important for us to meet where we're at and not force ourselves to not feel whatever it is we're experiencing, from my perspective. So if you're one of those that's in it right now and experiencing that low level, I've been there. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. And then when you come through the other side, though, it's like you have a new lease on life sometimes. I've been tuning in a lot to near-death experiences. I find that's where I'm drawn to focus my attention on for whatever reason. I'm sharing this because everybody's in a different... I've started a lot of playlists, you guys, in my own channel. So if you're watching this and you're like, I don't know who to listen to, or I don't know what to watch, check it out. Go in my playlist channel and look at all of the playlists I've created. I haven't organized them 100%, but I've got stuff in there: science, sacred geometry, near NDEs, near-death experiences. I added 2 people in a neurologist, neurosurgeon, and another woman who was supported by Wayne Dyer. And I've never really paid attention to those things. But what happens, I find, is someone will put something in my field for me to focus on because that's what I'm tuning into. The reason I'm sharing that is because there's been times when I've connected with people that have passed on. So I recognize that this is a gift for me to tune more into that, if I want to hone in on that gift. So I'm still working through that and learning how to interact with these beings and all of that. I think that sometimes when we work with other people, it activates us. So if you're watching this, Jody, thank you. I worked with Jody. So I say oftentimes when I work with someone, I'm activating them to remember more of their potential, of their gifts, to see something maybe in their field that they might have been missing. And we open that channel up. And sometimes this is not just about me doing that work. It's about what a lot of us are experiencing right now. We're opening up these channels and all this stuff can come up. So sometimes emotions come up. Sometimes we see things that we didn't see before. Literally, it can be entities. It can be things about ourselves. Sometimes those are one and the same, versions of us. Sometimes they're shadows. Sometimes they're beautiful pieces of information that we hadn't recognized before. And then we are activated by, how can we be activated? I'm not just speaking about sessions with other light workers. It can be through a conversation. It can be a beautiful piece of music. It can be light language. It can be connecting with Mother Nature and having a flashback of being in that particular place before. It can be at a sacred site, so on and so forth. Activations, from my perspective, can come in from everywhere. There are certain channels and starseeds and humans that are tapped into their extrasensory abilities that can activate maybe a little bit more directly, is all I'm sharing. And when I work with people, oftentimes, I'll remind them, if we're working together, recognize that it's going to bring things up. So if you're not ready to deal with those things, you may want to consider working with someone else. You may want to consider doing the work on your own first so that it's not so raw. But that's the other subject I wanted to kind of get into. Often what's happening on a collective layer and level is everything's coming up. So everything feels raw for a lot of people. So when you work with someone else who is a channel or whatever it might be, or an activator, it can be like really intense right now. But on the flip side, we signed up for this from one perspective, and if we're not ready, right, then we wouldn't be here. And if we're not ready, we can say, you know what, I'm not ready. It's that simple. We have the power to take our power back, and just because we're activated doesn't mean that we have to necessarily look at that right now if we're not ready for it. But on the flip side, the question that I keep getting asked is, why aren't you ready for it? What is it that's there that's holding us back? What is it that we could maybe change about our perspective about that thing that we're labeling as a big deal, that maybe isn't that big of a deal? And this is kind of a common theme I've been having in session, is that, and I've had it myself, we make a bigger deal out of things than they really are. And I'm not knocking, for example, COrVID. That's a perfect example. At this point, at this juncture, why are we making such a big deal out of something that's just a cold? Now, I recognize, though, having said that, it's still a thing where it hasn't completely turned into just a cold. There are some people who still, because of their bodies or because of their immune system, can get sick and can die because of repercussions. So I'm not making light of it, but what I'm trying to say is that's part of life from another perspective. Disease and transitioning is part of what we've always experienced on Earth. So I would venture to take that into the next level, because there are those that are awakening to having dreams that are coming true, seeing ghosts, seeing entities, all the little heebie-jeebies that are, is that what, the little boogeymen that are floating around that don't have a home because they've been, the vibration, they either have to leave, right? Or they're just floating around. Some of them are shadow aspects of ourselves that we've created. Sometimes we see entities and we think that it might be a shadow version of us that we're just showing up for us so that we can acknowledge it and take our power back and say, I no longer give this thing, entity, fear, anger, power. And boom, it dissolves and away it goes. So what I'm sharing is sometimes it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. The more power we give something, whether it be childhood trauma, and again, I'm not knocking the fact that that is really big for some people. I have had a traumatic childhood. And I'm not talking about minor, pretty majorly traumatic childhood growing up. And I experienced it one way, my family experienced it a different way. We all had each of our own experiences with a particular person in our reality who was abusive. Now, I look back at that, and this person has since passed, and I forgive them. Not only do I forgive them, but I acknowledge all that I am and who I am. Now I get a little emotional. It's beautiful. It wasn't when I went through it. It was ugly. And when I remembered things that I had seen as a child also that traumatized me, I had seen entities, and I'd had dreams of very scary beings and things like that. And a lot of light workers or people who have that extrasensory ability as a kid, they're visited and it's scary. However, I've done work to move that in and out, to acknowledge, to recognize, and to see that isn't who I am. It's merely an experience that I had in my life, and that experience I no longer need to attach myself to. Therefore, I clear the cords, I clear the attachments, entanglements, and energies and emotions associated with that particular experience, person, entity, memory. It doesn't mean that it's not there. I just have a different relationship with it. I have a different perspective around it. Even when I say relationship, I don't need to have a relationship with it. It just is or was what it was. And I know people don't necessarily always like that. I love using that term because it's the isness of the is, of all that is. So I had to go through those stages though. And this is where I'm going with this next part of this conversation. I might run out of time. Is the stages of awareness. I had to go through anger. So anger came up for me, by the way, this week, big time. I had to what do I do when I get angry? I yell. I cuss. I yell and I cuss. Providing usually nobody's around except for my poor husband, and he does the same thing, so we're fine. I don't always yell and cuss, but this week I did. It was one of those moments where I was just fun, And sometimes I feel better after that. Sometimes I don't. It usually only lasts for me for about a minute. I get it all out and then I'm like, whew, I just threw a tantrum. And we're human. We can do that. It's okay to do that from my perspective. So I yell, I cuss. Most of the time though, if I'm angry, I will do my best to exercise and get it out that way through movement. Where was I going with that? Oh, the stages. So I had to get to the point where I had processed my emotions and attachments around these particular circumstances in my life and people in my life who I had been in unusual situations with, abuse, whatever it might be. And it's not, I look at it now and I'm like, it's no big deal. But at the time, it was a big deal. And so that's something to acknowledge. Where are we in that process? Are we ready to process those memories, those emotions, those feelings? And if we're not, that's our choice. But I would like to share that the longer we hang on to that stuff, the more toxic it becomes. The more this is what causes schisms or splits, right? We split off. We compartmentalize that part of us so that we don't have to deal with it. And I did that for a long time. There was that aspect where I just put it in a box and thought I'm going to ignore it. And, I will say, sometimes you can do that. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes I'll put things in a box, but then I destroy it. I clear it, meaning I visualize it, I put it in a box, and I burn it. Or I write out what I want to clear, and I burn it. Or I get into water, and I imagine it dissolving. But the difference between that is I'm acknowledging and recognizing what it is that I'm alchemizing, right? And I'm doing it with intention and focus so that when I go through that process, it has more meaning. If I were to just ignore it and pretend like it never happened or it's not there, or but then again, if I'm always saying, well, it's there and I'm doing this because I was abused or because I had this happen, that's feeding it and giving it more power. So, and that isn't who I am. if that makes sense. So I'm just sharing again, that's my own process. Some people go see therapists. Some people do yoga. Some people, everybody's different. I'm probably going to run out of room here in just a minute, but find your own way and recognize that now everything is coming up to the surface, even if we don't think we're ready to deal with it. I said earlier, if you're not ready to deal with it, you're not ready to deal with it. However, we're being pushed from one perspective to deal with it. So don't be surprised if we don't want to deal with something, but here it is right in front of us. Because sometimes we don't think we're ready to deal with it, but really we are. But we've been in resistance for so long that it's become a pattern that is hard to break. It's easier, more comfortable to ignore it. But in actuality, that can oftentimes create more dis-ease and lack of well-being, and it creates that rift. And we might seem perfectly fine on the outside, but then there's that element on the inside of our wounded inner child, or possibly the sacred masculine or sacred feminine because of abuse. There could be mental, emotional, physical, whatever it might be. It's that those are all part of it's a memory thing. So anyways, I'm just sharing that this is all coming up for a lot of people. Stuff I thought I had dealt with is coming up again, just in little tiny pieces, where I'm like, oh, I didn't even, isn't that interesting? Okay, so I'll do part 2 because I'm running out of room on this particular video. So I honor everybody in your journey, and I just want to say that we are really all going through a lot. And at the same time, if we can just simplify it and make it easier on us, and maybe not make a mountain out of a molehill, or take that mountain and dissolve it so that it's not such a huge chunk of our reality, of our feeling of regret, fear, shame, blame. The more we can process it, this is the time. We're being gifted with the sun activity, with that fire, right? With the earth expanding. We're being gifted with the opportunity to shapeshift our reality, shapeshift in our bodies, to go through these dis-eases or viruses, to then clear out the distortions, to recognize the distortions that come up from these particular experiences. And how we interact with one another is also part of it. So I'm going to end on that note, and in love and light, guys. Namaste.